it's not GPT-4 that's terrifying. It's that GPT-4 is a baby technology. And Microsoft even had a paper recently out with a title something like Sparkles of AGI. Well, they were basically saying this is baby AI, like these little Neanderthal babies. And it's going to grow up. There's going to be other systems from the same company, from other companies. They'll be way more powerful, but they're going to take all the ideas from these babies. And before we know it, we're going to be like those last Neanderthals who were pretty disappointed and when they realized that they were getting replaced.
Well, this interesting point you make, which is the programming, it's entirely possible that GPT-4 is already the kind of system that can change everything by writing programs.
So, Life 3, it's because it's Life 2.0. The systems I'm afraid of are going to look nothing like a large language model, and they're not going to. But once it or other people figure out a way of using this tech to make much better tech, right? Mm-hmm. It's just constantly replacing its software. And from everything we've seen about how these work under the hood, they're like the minimum viable intelligence. They do everything in the dumbest way that still works, sort of.
Yeah.
And so they are Life 3.0, except when they replace their software, it's a lot faster than when you decide to learn Swedish. And moreover, they think a lot faster than us too. So when we don't think on have one logical step every nanosecond or so the way they do, and we can't also just suddenly scale up our hardware massively in the cloud. We're so limited, right? So they are also can soon become a little bit more like Life 3.0 in that if they need more hardware, hey, just rent it in the cloud. How do you pay for it? Well, with all the services you provide.
And what we haven't seen yet, which could change a lot, is entire software system. So right now, programming is done sort of in bits and pieces as an assistant tool to humans. But I do a lot of programming, and with the kind of stuff that GPT-4 is able to do, I mean, it's replacing a lot what I'm able to do. But you still need a human in the loop to kind of manage the design of things, manage like what are the prompts that generate the kind of stuff, to do some basic adjustment of the code, to do some debugging. But if it's possible to add on top of GPT-4 kind of feedback loop of self-debugging, improving the code, and then you launch that system out into the wild on the internet because everything is connected, and have it do things, have it interact with humans, and then get that feedback. Now you have this giant ecosystem of humans. That's one of the things that Elon Musk recently sort of tweeted as a case why everyone needs to pay $7 or whatever for Twitter.
To make sure they're real.
Make sure they're real. We're now going to be living in a world where the bots are getting smarter and smarter and smarter to a degree where you can't tell the difference between a human and a bot.
That's right.
And now you can have bots outnumber humans by 1 million to 1, which is why he's making the case why you have to pay to prove you're human, which is one of the only mechanisms to prove, which is depressing.
And I feel we have to remember, as individuals, we should from time to time ask ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing? Right? And as a species, we need to do that too. So if we're building, as you say, machines that are outnumbering us and more and more outsmarting us and replacing us on the job market, not just for the dangerous and boring tasks, but also for writing poems and doing art and things that a lot of people find really meaningful, we've got to ask ourselves, why? Why are we doing this? The answer is Moloch is tricking us into doing it. And it's such a clever trick that even though we see the trick, we still have no choice but to fall for it, right? Also, the thing you said about you using Copilot AI tools to program faster, what factor faster would you say you code now? Does it go twice as fast? Or
I don't really, because it's such a new tool.
yeah,
I don't know if speed is significantly improved, but it feels like I'm a year away from being 5 to 10 times faster.
So if that's typical for programmers, then you're already seeing another kind of recursive self-improvement, right? Because previously, a major generation of improvement of the code would happen on the human R&D time scale. And now if that's 5 times shorter, then it's going to take 5 times less time than it otherwise would to develop the next level of these tools, and so on. So this is exactly the sort of beginning of an intelligence explosion. There can be humans in the loop a lot in the early stages, and then eventually humans are needed less and less, and the machines can more kind of go alone. But what you said there is just an exact example of these sort of things. Another thing which I was kind of lying on my psychiatrist, imagining I'm on a psychiatrist's couch here, saying, well, "What are my fears that people would do with AI systems?" So I mentioned 3 that I had fears about many years ago that they would do, namely teach it the code, connect it to the internet, and teach it to manipulate humans. A 4th one is building an API where code can control this super powerful thing, right? That's very unfortunate, because one thing that systems like GPT-4 have going for them is that they are an oracle, in the sense that they just answer questions. There is no robot connected to GPT-4. GPT-4 can't go and do stock trading based on its thinking.
Yeah.
It is not an agent. An intelligent agent is something that takes in information from the world, processes it to figure out what action to take based on its goals that it has, and then does something back on the world. But once you have an API, for example, GPT-4, nothing stops Joe Schmo and a lot of other people from building real agents, which just keep making calls somewhere in some inner loop somewhere to these powerful oracle systems, and which makes them themselves much more powerful. That's another kind of unfortunate development, which I think we would have been better off delaying. I don't want to pick on any particular companies. I think they're all under a lot of pressure to make money.
Yeah.
And again, the reason we're calling for this pause is to give them all cover to do what they know is the right thing. Just slow down a little bit at this point. But everything we've talked about, I hope will make it clear to people watching this, why these sort of human level tools can cause a gradual acceleration. You keep using yesterday's technology to build tomorrow's technology.
Yeah.
And when you do that over and over again, you naturally get an explosion. That's the definition of an explosion in science, right? Like if you have 2 people and they fall in love, now you have 4 people, and then they can make more babies, and now you have 8 people, and then you have 16, 32, 64, etc. We call that a population explosion, where it's just that if it's instead free neutrons in a nuclear reaction, that if each one can make more than one, then you get an exponential growth in that. We call it a nuclear explosion. All explosions are like that. And an intelligence explosion, it's just exactly the same principle, that some amount of intelligence can make more intelligence than that, and then repeat. You always get exponentials.
What's your intuition why it does? You mentioned there's some technical reasons why it doesn't stop at a certain point. What's your intuition? And do you have any intuition why it might stop?
It's obviously going to stop when it bumps up against the laws of physics. There are some things you just can't do no matter how smart you are, right?
Allegedly.
And
because we don't know the full laws of physics
yet,
right?
Seth Lloyd wrote a really cool paper on the physical limits on computation. For example, if you put too much energy into it in a finite space, it'll turn into a black hole. You can't move information around faster than the speed of light, stuff like that. But it's hard to store way more than a modest number of bits per atom, etc. But those limits are just astronomically above, like 30 orders of magnitude above where we are now. So bigger jump in intelligence than if you go from an ant to a human. I think, of course, what we want to do is have a controlled thing. Like a nuclear reactor, you put moderators in to make sure exactly it doesn't blow up out of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we do experiments with biology and cells and so on, we also try to make sure it doesn't get out of control. We can do this with AI too. The thing is, we haven't succeeded yet. And Moloch is exactly doing the opposite, just fueling, just egging everybody on, faster, faster, faster. Or the other company is going to catch up with you, or the other country is going to catch up with you. We have to want this stuff. We have to, and I don't believe in this just asking people to look into their hearts and do the right thing. It's easier for others to say that, but like if you're in a situation where your company is going to get screwed, if you by other companies that are not stopping, you're putting people in a very hard situation. The right thing to do is change the whole incentive structure instead. And this is not an old. Maybe I should say one more thing about this, because Moloch has been around as humanity's number one or number two enemy since the beginning of civilization, and we came up with some really cool countermeasures. Like, first of all, already over 100,000 years ago, evolution realized that it was very unhelpful that people kept killing each other all the time.
Yeah.
So it genetically gave us compassion and made it so that like if you get two drunk dudes getting into a pointless bar fight, they might give each other black eyes, but they have a lot of inhibition towards just killing each other. And similarly, if you find a baby lying on the street when you go out for your morning jog tomorrow, you're going to stop and pick it up, right? Even though it make you late for your next podcast. So evolution gave us these genes that make our own egoistic incentives more aligned with what's good for the greater group we're part of, right? And then as we got a bit more sophisticated and developed language, we invented gossip, which is also a fantastic anti-Moloch, right? Because now it really discourages liars, moochers, cheaters, because their own incentive now is not to do this, because word quickly gets around, and then suddenly people aren't going to invite them to their dinners anymore or trust them. And then when we got still more sophisticated and bigger societies, invented the legal system, where even strangers who couldn't rely on gossip and things like this would would have an incentive. Now those guys in the bar fight, even if someone is so drunk that he actually wants to kill the other guy, he also has a little thought in the back of his head that, do I really want to spend the next 10 years eating like really crappy food in a small room? I'm just gonna chill out, So, and we similarly have tried to give these incentives to our corporations by having regulation and all sorts of oversight, so that their incentives are aligned with the greater good. We tried really hard, the big problem that we're failing now is not that we haven't tried before, but it's just that the tech is developing much faster than the regulators have been able to keep up, right? So regulators, it's kind of comical that the European Union right now is doing this AI Act, right? And in the beginning, they had a little opt-out exception that GPT-4 would be completely excluded from regulation. Brilliant idea.
What's the logic behind that?
Some lobbyists pushed successfully for this. So we were actually quite involved with the Future Life Institute, Mark Brackel, Risto Ook, Anthony Aguirre, and others. We're quite involved with educating various people involved in this process about these general purpose AI models coming, and pointing out that they would become the laughingstock if they didn't put it in. So the French started pushing for it. It got put in to the draft, and it looked like all was good. Then there was a huge counter push from lobbyists. Yeah, there were more lobbyists in Brussels from tech companies than from oil companies, for example. And it looked like it's going to maybe get taken out again. And now GPT-4 happened. And I think it's going to stay in. But this just shows, Moloch can be defeated. But the challenge we're facing is that the tech is generally much faster than what the policymakers are.
Mhm.
And a lot of the policymakers also don't have a tech background, so we really need to work hard to educate them on what's taking place here. So we're getting this situation where the first kind of I define artificial intelligence just as non-biological intelligence. Okay?
Mhm.
And by that definition, a company, a corporation is also an artificial intelligence, because the corporation it's humans, it's a system. If its CEO decides, the CEO of a tobacco company decides one morning that she or he doesn't want to sell cigarettes anymore, they'll just put another CEO in there. It's not enough to align the incentives of individual people or align individual computers' incentives to their owners, which is what technically AI safety research is about. You also have to align the incentives of corporations with the greater good. And some corporations have gotten so big and so powerful very quickly that in many cases their lobbyists instead align the regulators to what they want rather than the other way around. It's a classic regulatory capture.
Right. Is the thing that the slowdown hopes to achieve is give enough time to the regulators to catch up, or enough time to the companies themselves to breathe and understand how to do AI safety correctly?
I think both, but I think that the vision, the path to success I see is first you give a breather actually to the people in these companies, their leadership who wants to do the right thing, and they all have safety teams and so on their companies. Give them a chance to get together with the other companies, and the outside pressure can also help catalyze that, right?
Mhm.
And work out what are the reasonable safety requirements one should put on future systems before they get rolled out. There are a lot of people also in academia and elsewhere outside of these companies who can be brought into this and have a lot of very good ideas. And then I think it's very realistic that within 6 months, you can get these people coming up to, here's a white paper, here's what we all think is reasonable. Just because cars killed a lot of people, you didn't ban cars, but they got together, a bunch of people, and decided, in order to be allowed to sell a car, it has to have a seatbelt in it.
Mhm.